I know you get clickbait all the time from us YouTubers saying, blah, blah, blah has changed forever. But truly, I want to say here what happened this summer with Charli XCX's Brat album rollout will change what smart artists, whether they're DIY on up to the majors, will do with their album rollouts forever. Since this isn't about the type of music she makes or her status as an artist who is huge, or that it was her 6th album, but for the real heads, we all know it was her 9th album. Instead, this is about how artists keep calling attention to themselves, and most of all, figuring out a different way to maximize hype in part of the album cycle that so many artists, frankly, fuck up. So let's figure this out. So let's start out and define what the most boring album rollout that is commonly used today for artists is. Whether they're big or small, they all do the same boring thing. You know, the type of thing you guys go over to ChatGPT to solve for you, and it'll literally tell you this boring of an album rollout, and then you'll get forgotten because you should not be listening to ChatGPT on things like this. Sometime 3 to 6 months before the release of the album, a string of singles is released. Usually 2 to 6 seems to be the norm, but some projects start earlier than 6 months and it even hits 8 singles before the record drops. And really, while some of you are clutching your pearls, trust me, that's a thing. My audience wears tons of them. 8 singles is smart, since whenever we do a post-mortem look back at an album cycle, it's very easy for those of us who can read graphs to see if we had released more singles, well, the splash would have been bigger on an album. Since if things are going well, the algorithmic spread of more singles in time actively feeding fans makes for more streams. And people we have algorithmic connections to and who are in conversations around us increase how many people get alerted to the album and then how many people check it out. Anyway, so you release the singles, then the album drops with a bunch of songs that weren't released as singles. Then we enter this area called the WTF area, where the album has come out, but because you are out of singles, you have no idea what to do, since singles being released is the biggest way to grow your fan base, and now you have to hope the album spreads through fans. And it feels weird to you to do more music videos since, well, those album tracks didn't feel worthy of being singles, so why are you making videos for them? Now, some groups tour, others do collab tracks with other artists. Let's be honest, most just throw their hands up and put up anniversary posts once in a while, saying 6 months since I released my masterpiece, and celebrate when they get a good record review or someone shares a story about their record from time to time. But really, they pretty much give up in the WTF area. If the record did well, the smarter musicians will either release the songs they cut from the record or record a few extras, and a year later or sometimes a little bit more, release a deluxe edition to tide over the fans till they repeat this boring but, you know, somewhat effective process. And they repeat this till their singer gets caught texting a teenager and they get canceled. What? I kind of kid, of course. But you're probably wondering, what did Charli XCX do to change this up that I'm so excited about to make a video? So I'm over a decade into my fandom of Charli XCX. I have a tattoo of one of her songs and probably know way too much, but this also means that if you get bored hearing me talk about this, skip to the next chapter, since I'm showing a ton of restraint, not discussing the 20 other aspects of this rollout that I could go on and on and on about. So on February 29th, 2024, aka Leap Year's Day for those keeping score of the weirdest thing we do as a society and accept as a thing, Charli dropped Von Dutch, a banger, a classic focus track, and for those who don't know what a focus track is, that's a track that bridges your last record sound to your new record sound. It's widely praised, and less than a month later, we get the remix with Addison Rae and producer A.G. Cook, which goes mega viral. And then 9 days later, we get the double single drop of B2B and Club Classic. And the double song drop in a day is a thing a lot of artists do to preview the album's actual palette of what it's gonna sound like, and we get a glimpse of what we now know that this record has, which is a very club sound as compared to the pop palette of her last record, Crash. 10 days later, we get another Von Dutch remix, and then 360, the album's breakout early single, drops a month later. And then about 3 weeks later, we get the remix with dance music queen icon Robin and Mumble-Drain Gang star Young Lean. So at this point, Charli has spread her algorithmic connections for this record all over the place, which is a preview of what could come. And one of the biggest strategies that made this record so far is her collaborations hit every corner of the underground, so she'd be showing up on nearly every algorithmic playlist in the underground world of dance and beyond for that matter. Now, this technique is important since so many artists backload their collaborations or save them for the album, but as you make more of them before the album comes out, it sets the album up for more success and a bigger splash, which helps it go further. But as I was saying, 1 month later, we got the drop of the album Brat, a record absent of collaborations, as she wanted this to be a very personal statement of how she's feeling now, to quote a previous record of hers. Okay. But here's where things get weird, and no one saw this coming. Charli had created this Brat wall, coincidentally on the outside of my gym, where she had bought a billboard dubbed the Brat Wall, which happens to be across from this very cool Brooklyn outdoor DJ place called called The Lot Radio that broadcast their DJ sets online. Great YouTube channel. Anyway, the Brat wall became a place where she'd constantly be putting up announcements of what was coming next, and meanwhile, on the other side of it, if you could see through it with like x-ray glasses, you could see me struggling on the rowing machine for another 5 minutes to get to my goal.
Sad.
Anyway, this kept fans on the edge of their seat, wondering what would happen next. She'd be constantly changing this wall, and people would be walking by just to see what happens or watching online to see. She did a DJ set and a performance outside the wall she announced the day of, and I attended it since, well, I live right there. So let's get back to the release. So 2 days after Brat drops, the wall no longer says Brat, and it changes to this, announcing that the record will now have a deluxe edition. And the next day, 3 more songs were added to the record. Now, funny enough, this wasn't new for Charli. As her last record crashed, she kept the conversation of the record going by 1 week later, dropping 4 more songs. But by doing this even quicker, it gave more of the edge of the seats feeling of not knowing what she will do next, which creates a conversation since most artists don't do that. But hold up for a second, since today's video is brought to you by our friends at Bandzoogle, who are my favorite easy way to create a great looking website for musicians. Bandzoogle is built by musicians for musicians, and it's an easy all-in-one platform that makes it easy to build a stunning website and online store for your music in minutes. No, seriously, it really is that fast. All the features you need are already built in, including dozens of fully customizable templates, tools to sell your music and merch commission-free, mailing list tools to grow your fan list, integrations with Bandcamp, SoundCloud, YouTube, Bands in Town, and so many more so you can easily add content from your other online profiles. They also have live support from their musician-friendly team 7 days a week, unlike a lot of their competition. Website plans start at just $8.29 a month, which includes hosting and your own free custom domain. My viewers can go to bandzoogle.com to try for free for 30 days if they use the promo code MUSEFORMATION to get 50% off their first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code MUSEFORMATION, and there's a link in the description. But I've been using the word conversations a lot, so let's talk about that in hyping albums, since they are a key part of how album rollouts spread, and my next video goes way deeper on that, so check the description for that link if you're watching this a week later, and it's also why you should be subscribed with notifications on. So many of you have listened to a few too many entrepreneurial gurus, you know, those dudes with the Gen Z alpaca haircut, and they tell you really basic, not based ideas on branding, that if everything isn't aligned in a brand and controlled, the project will fall apart. But the real fact is, the contradictions and the chaos when it comes to artistry are often the conversation. Keeping fans on the edge of their seat and doing things they wouldn't expect gets them talking to their friends and talking online, and that's what spreads the word on an album. A thing you're gonna hear me say a lot since I coined it the other week is the contradictions are the conversation. Charli's contradictions of singing honest songs about doing key bumps, or if she should have a child, which are polar opposites, were a big discussion on the record. The record having no features and then a whole ton of remixes and a record of collaborations is a contradiction that generates conversation. And of course, an album rollout being masterfully planned while feeling chaotic and weird and all over the place and constantly unfolding is a contradiction that creates conversation. So let's get back to this rollout though. So just 10 days later after those songs dropped that preceded the Brat drop, the Brat wall updates yet again, and she drops a remix of a song about Lorde, with Lorde saying her side to the song. And then in the next 4 months, we get constant appearances at all sorts of late night spots in clubs, TikToks, the mega viral Apple dance on TikTok, the launch of her co-headliner tour Sweat with Troye Sivan, and of course the thing we're not gonna get into here, which is the whole Kamala is Brat thing, and how somehow she found her culturally taking over the whole Democratic election process. Weird. But if you do want to hear about that, you'll need to read my newsletter, Music Marketing Trends, where I write about that, and I already wrote about how Charli's good instincts made her the biggest success of the year, and why Katy Perry had bad instincts and they destroyed her career. And that's linked in the description if you want to get subscribed or read it. But we're talking about album rollouts, right? So remember the WTF area? What Charli really changed with this rollout is what to do here. Now, in a previous video on album marketing, I argued the difference between when an album comes out is the conversation shifts what the album is going to be to after it comes out, the experience people have with it as they live with it and create memories with it. But what Charli did here that you can steal is she continued creating conversations around the record continuously for months on end, and with the most powerful thing you have to do that with, which is music. Now, some of you are thinking,
Jesse, artists put out remix records all the time.
yes, but they come in two ways usually. They either come out a year or more later, or the day the record does, rather than continue the conversation while the record is riding high in the discussion and reminding people to re-up their relationship with the record, which is important because people forget about these records fast. I'm sure almost all of us have had an artist we really love and we somehow forget about their record and then come back to it a few months later when we're reminded of it. This helps to ensure that doesn't happen. You keep thinking about this record. But truly, the most common thing is to wait so long to put out these remix records or these other versions of a record. For example, in Charli's lane, Lady Gaga released her remix record, Dawn of Chromatica, over a year after Chromatica. When you release something else to change the conversation around your album's drop, while the record is fresh and the conversation is still happening, it makes the splash bigger. It's no longer that feeling of, that old record, we're still talking about that. Instead, it makes the record more relevant and like it's this thing that was so important, it's still a part of the conversation months or weeks later whenever you do it. I mean, there's even a conversation to be had if Charli's remix record, Brat, and it's completely different but also still Brat, isn't even a remix record. It's more just collaborations where she worked with other artists on different versions, not necessarily gave them it to remix. But I don't want to keep you here much longer, and I have a point to make for how you all do this. So the first step is thinking how you can use the most powerful marketing tool you have, which is songs. And then secondly, videos to sustain the conversation around your record longer. And think about how you can change conversations to go deeper with your music with both those tools. Can you get people talking with contradictions? Can you use spectacle in a video? And there's more on that if you want to watch a video on how to create spectacle in a video that I made already. It's in the description. Or is there some way we can get people to see a new way that your song could sound, like an acoustic version or something else? Some of this is identifying what your most important audience members actually discuss. For example, Charli's most influential fans in the pop world are now referred to as the girls and the gay, the catty people who talk all day online about culture and set the agenda for taste making others follow because they usually bully anybody who doesn't agree with them. Giving the conversation bait on if Charli was too mean to Lorde on that one song, and then Lorde jumps on and is like, yeah, I can see your side to this. That's a big conversation. Charli did a song with Billie Eilish that is horned up beyond belief, and everybody thought Billie was taking things too seriously at that point, and that changed the conversation. And then they brought this artist, the Darren, who's like the most horned up dude right now in music, maybe up to Artemis, and that changed the conversation. And of course, Charli's song Spring Breakers, where she literally threatens to burn down the Grammys if they don't give her an award this year. Well, that should be an interesting ceremony this year, since it seems like she has a nomination, and that's gonna create quite a conversation. But I say this all because if you're a metal group, studying with the neckbeards chatting at shows and online are talking about it, and how you can create conversations they have around music is an important way to brainstorm this. Can you make orchestral alternate versions? Metal neckbeards love horror movies. Can you create a low-budget horror movie soundtrack by the record you made for your videos? Figure it out. If you're a folk artist, maybe you do what seminal emo group American Football just did and release a record of your buds covering your songs. This is your art. Figure out how you keep the conversation going by changing the context. Maybe you can reimagine each song with some friends. Maybe you can bring in some musicians you really like to play with you and see how they would have sounded if you brought people in for a different version. But really, as I was saying, Charli changed the WTF area about how you keep evolving the conversation around your record during the immediate few months after it. Can you make people hear it different by making another version? Is there a version where you change the lyrics to some songs upon reflection of how you've grown since that record? Maybe you collaborate with another artist and get their perspective on what the song is about and have them sing a verse that way. Either way, what I bet this album rollout will change is so many artists will now see that they need to immediately sustain the conversation around their record by showing people what they can see it for in deeper and different ways. It doesn't even always need to be contradiction. It could just be another way. It could just be a deeper way. It could just be reconsidering the song. It's your art. Make your own choices, but make sure you get out some messaging there so fans know how to contemplate it, because they're not always so bright. But really, the path is to have this conversation not years later, but as the record is digested and sustained for as long as possible. Since in a world where creators are all constantly talking about music online and culture and friends have these discussions for months themselves, wanting to be part of the conversation, that's what drives listening and learning about artists. So if you can create these conversations, you're going to get a lot of free promotion from the conversations they create. We want to now take advantage of the conversation while people are most excited about it, not a year later, so it amplifies it and everybody everybody starts to hear more and more about you, since the bigger the conversation, the more it goes up for you pages, and more people are likely to see it and see it as something that they think is important to understand. So here's the thing, while you just learned this, if you really want to grow your fan base, you need to understand how to market an album, which I explain on the video that's on the screen right now. So make sure you watch that next. Thanks for watching.